Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next in our series on the Beatitudes, where today we are going to be looking at oaths and keeping our words. When I thought about this, and I first thought about this topic, I immediately thought to my response as a parent, because when I asked my kids who did something or how did that happen, I always tell them it's better to tell me the truth straight off rather than try and hide it, because if something's been broken or spilt or something wrong has happened, okay, that needs dealing with. But if they lie to me about that, then things are far worse. And actually, for me personally, I really value honesty and truth and integrity. And actually, I get far more annoyed about people lying to me or trying to deceive me than I do about something going horribly wrong. So if one of the kids breaks a window, for instance, and I say, who did that? Oh, I don't know is the answer. And then I find out it turns out to be one of the little toads at some point who shouldn't have been doing whatever they were doing. I'm far more likely to be annoyed about the fact they lied to me and didn't tell me from the beginning, and felt they got to hide it from me, than the actual broken window. So keeping your word and telling the truth, for me personally, I think is a really important issue, and it's something I really relate to. So reading this reading and hearing what Jesus has got to say about oaths, I think is really important. So what does actually Jesus say in the reading? Well, first of all, he does as he quite often has been doing with these series on the Beatitudes. He starts by looking back, what was before, talking about what the Israelites knew and what they were aware of. And he says, looking back, you know that you do not break your oath, but instead you fulfill your oath as if it is made to the Lord. Which I think is a really good principle. So if you are, if you've made an oath to someone, if you've promised to buy something, or if you owe somebody money, or you've made an agreement, you treat that agreement not as if you've made it with somebody down the road who you know, or someone else within the church, or a member of your family. You honour that agreement as if you've made it with God, because that's the value of it. You should be totally and utterly obliged to that oath. And if you imagined every promise you made is a promise to God himself, then we really would value it and stand by it, won't we? And Jesus takes a very interesting tack at this point, because you can imagine he could have easily just expanded on what I've just said. Every promise you make, you honour it as if it is to God. You must keep your word at all times. But he doesn't. He goes in a very different direction, as he so often does. So what does he say? Well, he says, don't swear an oath at all. It's better to not swear an oath, which is a bit surprising. His listeners would have gone, what? What? We're expecting him to tell us how important oaths were, not to completely negate them and say, no, don't swear an oath. It's not what they expect. And he expands on it a bit. And I think he's sort of expanding on possibly how oaths were sworn, or what people would have said at the time. Because he says, don't swear an oath by heaven, because heaven belongs to God. How can you make a promise to honour a business deal or honour a relationship by heaven when heaven isn't yours to make a promise by? How can you do that? That's what he's saying. So just don't do it. Do not swear by heaven. It's not yours. It belongs to God. You cannot promise what's not yours. And he follows up. And then do not make an oath by earth. Guess what? It's God's footstool. In other words, his too. This classic image of God's head is in heaven, but his feet are on earth. Jesus is playing to that. But it's God's as well. Earth is God's. Don't make a promise by what's not yours. nor by Jerusalem, the jewel in the crown of the nation. Jerusalem was held so keenly and so centrally to them. So, yeah, do not promise by Jerusalem. Not yours. How dare you make a promise by that or an oath by it? So don't. Probably quite shocking for them to hear at that time. And then he even goes even further. He says, do not even make an oath by your own head. Eh? Do not make an oath by your own head, because you have no control over the colour of your hair. So why do you think you have control over your own head to make a promise by it? Being somebody who's a bit more follically challenged, I can certainly agree. I have no control over the colour or the nature of my hair, or lack of it, or even the little grey bits that are starting to appear on my chin here. It's not by my own will or doing. Who has control over this? Well, a scientist may say it's genetics, but, I would happily say, God is the one who has designed me to be me, not anyone else. So how can I make a promise by my own head? In some ways, I have no control of it. And instead, Jesus simply says, say yes or no. That's it. Yes or no. That should be good enough. He's actually trying to make the point of saying, well, what is the point of swearing an oath? Just say yes or no, and that should be good enough. And he finishes by saying anything beyond that, well, to be honest, it's from the evil one, which I'll expand on in a bit. So what's going on here? What is it that we are to think about? Well, the first thing that jumps to me is, well, what is an oath? Because for an oath is something we encounter actually still quite a bit in our modern world. The first thing that came to my mind about swearing an oath is that classic moment you see in the movies, don't you, in a court case where somebody puts their hand on the Bible and promises to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. An oath. The presence of the Bible there is trying to signify the importance of someone's words and how they promise to really, really mean it. And yet, sadly, we know that people don't always take that oath very seriously. But there are other oaths. A couple of weeks ago, I was involved in a very important set of oaths. I married, in fact, 2 couples recently I've married, and standing in front of the church, repeating line by line a pre-written oath that I read to them, to each other, is so important. And to be honest, it's one of the most beautiful moments and real joys of my job of being a vicar, is having that power and authority to preside over that. Really important oaths. Do I think Jesus would say, don't swear an oath to get married, or don't swear an oath to tell the truth in a court case? No, I don't think he would. But an oath is all about making promises, saying things, but trying to put some added sort of weight to things, isn't it? To say it's not just the truth, but, I really, really mean this, and actually I'm willing to put a substance behind this. But promises are so important, and our words are so important, aren't they? But what Jesus is saying in this reading, with this very short passage of four simple verses, is don't make a promise by something you cannot make a promise by. So don't promise by heaven, earth, Jerusalem, the colour of the hair on your head. Or, as I was thinking writing this, actually, how often do we hear, I swear on my granny's life, or something like that? You've got no control over that. Jesus is saying don't do it, because it's just not right. We've got no control over these things. And actually, we've got to be careful, because words are powerful. And although I'm saying we have no control over these such things, you've got to be careful what you speak to. Because so much of the Bible teaches us the power of God's words, but I think sometimes we neglect the power of our own words. Our own words can be really powerful and damaging, not just in the practical world or even in our own hearts and minds, but I think in the spiritual sense, what we say sometimes can carry some real power. And we've got to be careful. And Jesus is warning against this. He's like, just don't. Just keep it simple. Be yes or no. Our word alone should be enough. We shouldn't be in doubt at all. And there's something actually reassuring about somebody we know who we know is trustworthy in what they say. When somebody says yes, they mean yes. When they say no, they mean no. And there's something really upsetting, isn't there? And unsettling when we know and meet somebody who we know, even though they say yes, and it's like, well, you can't trust them. And this is what goes with this, isn't it? If we say yes and mean yes, then we are trustworthy. And if we say no and mean no, we're trustworthy. And I'm sure we can easily think of people and situations and times where someone's word hasn't been trustworthy, when you doubt what someone is saying. And it's difficult, isn't it? Because how do you then measure what's actually going on? And yet, if we say and mean what we say and mean, the world would be such a better and simpler place. I find it so sad at the moment that as a nation, we don't trust our politicians anymore. It's no surprise that we don't trust our politicians anymore, because of what's been said and what's been done don't match. Sadly, we can all point to experiences of when a politician's word has not been honest or truthful. And yet, if we were all straight up and honest about our yeses and our nos, life would be so much simpler. But there is a challenge in this, isn't there? Because, like I started with kids, and if something's gotten broken, sometimes telling the truth is hard. Sometimes having a yes that means yes and a no that means no is actually difficult, isn't it? Because that then requires bravery to say the truth, as opposed to what you want or you think the other person wants you to hear, or what you think will get you out of trouble quicker. Sometimes that integrity is costly and is difficult. When somebody's asking something of you and actually the honest answer is, no, I can't do that, or no, I don't agree with you, can be really challenging. But there's an overall weight and a value, isn't there, in somebody who no matter what, will always be honest and frank with you, even if it means saying things that are difficult. So there's a real challenge in this. And is Jesus saying that we shouldn't swear oaths? Well, on the whole, yes, we should. Oaths shouldn't be necessary. They shouldn't be needed, because actually our yes should mean yes and our no should mean no, and that would be it. There should be no need for an oath. But then there's this line at the end, isn't there, about where Jesus says, anything beyond this is from the evil one. And what he's trying to get at here, and I said I'd come back to this, I think he's talking about doubt. Because doubt, for me, I think is one of the best ways that the enemy has got of working into our lives. Because once we start doubting, we become unsure, and we become anxious, and we become worried. And none of those things are things that God wants for us. None of them. God wants us to be content and happy and full of faith and trusting, not doubtful and worried. And when uncertainty of what somebody says really leads into that sense of uneasiness, isn't it? And that's when lies and deception can come in. That's what Jesus is trying to say here. So keep your yes meaning yes, and keep your no meaning no. Because how good would it be if the church was known to be a church that always told the truth? And there are some difficult things going on in the church and in our world that is difficult for us to say and tell the truth about. But we need to, because truthfulness and honesty will bring respect. And if we, as people and as a church and as individuals and as a community, hold respect, then that actually gives us authority to speak truth and a bigger truth to people. And that bigger truth is always and will always be about Jesus. What Jesus did for us, what he did for me, and what he did for you. And if we hold that respect within the community because we are truth tellers, then we will be heard. But if we are known for being dishonest and not always saying what we mean, then we will be dismissed. So, in summary, let your yes be yes, let your no be no, and let the world be blessed through our honesty. Amen.